ready to go? Seeing thumbs up, we are ready to go. So good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Harold. I am the Communications Director at SDOT, and I'm just going to be helping mediate this morning's conversation. We are gathered for a brief press availability this morning to ensure some transparency and dialogue around an evolving situation happening in real time with regard to Pier 58. So I just want to go over a couple of rules of the road, and then I'm going to turn it over to Park Superintendent Jesus to get us going. So first and foremost, we're going to utilize the chat box for people to note when they have questions during a presentation, but I'm going to ask that we please save Q&A, all Q&A for the end. So again, use the chat box if it helps you remember when and what you have a question about. But then we will return to Q&A, and I will acknowledge people who have submitted questions either in writing to then verbally ask their questions themselves, and we'll take you off of mute. Or when we reach Q&A and you do have a question then that hasn't been indicated in the chat box, you can use the hand raising, the virtual hand raising function, and we will call on you that way. And then, as we've all learned a million times over, in these strange times, please keep yourself on mute throughout unless you've been asked to raise a question or one of the panelists. So we'll go to Jesus, who will then turn it over to Sam. Sam, who will turn it back over to Jesus, and then over to Marshall. And I ask that as everyone is speaking, just please introduce yourself so none of us are guessing, though I'm sure everyone knows who everyone is. So with that, I'll turn it over to Parks Superintendent Jesus to get us started.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Michael, and good morning, everyone. And as Michael said, we're going to talk a little bit about the Pier 58 replacement. Director Samson Babwe will talk a little bit about the safety improvements along the waterfront, and then Director Foster from the Waterfront will talk about the future of the Pier 58 and how it fits into the overall waterfront plan. But to kind of, by way of background, I think folks know Pier 58 is the pier along the waterfront between the aquarium and between Miners Landing, which is a pier with the Great Wheel. And this is one of two public piers that are planned to be replaced as part of the new central waterfront. So the Pier 58 replacement was already being designed. The idea was to remove the existing pier and construct a new park and a pier in 2022. And of course, that's because like a lot of the stuff down there, Pier 58 is an aging piece of infrastructure that we have seen over the last couple of days that has deteriorated further. Earlier this week on August 5th, our Parks and Rec staff were alerted to an issue at the waterfront, a failure of a water line, and when they were on site, they noticed that there was some significant shifting of the pier with a visible gap between the pier itself and the adjacent upland there. We contacted our structural engineers who had already been monitoring this pier for some time now, and got a pretty quick assessment that led us to move forward with closing down the pier for public access while we conducted further assessment to make sure that there was we could preserve public safety. I will say that this is a pier that has been closely monitored actually for decades, as far as back as 1989. Pier 58 was subjected to a formal evaluation, and just like Parks and Rec does for its piers and other waterfront structures, we had reports in 2011 and 2016 by an engineering firm that made it pretty clear to us that the best course for the future of the pier was to replace it. And in the meantime, while we developed the plan to replace it, we were advised to regularly monitor and just keep an eye on things. In fact, the 2016 report that was submitted basically advised us that we could keep the pier open while the replacement was planned, but as long as we continued to monitor it and keep vehicles off the pier itself. So as we began to make a plan for the waterfront, we looked at the reports that we've had and utilized that information to move forward with the design and to fund a replacement for the pier as part of the capital projects, the overall waterfront project. So that's our background. I'm going to turn it over to Director Zimbabwe. We'll talk a little bit about the safety improvements along the waterfront in general.
Sure. Thanks, Jesus. So I'm Sam Zimbabwe. I'm the director of the Seattle Department of Transportation. Just really briefly, the Pier 58 is next to the Elliott Bay seawall, which is a separate structure, and that structure is in good shape and has not shifted along with the pier. There are, as Jesus mentioned, there are metal plates that span the joint between the seawall and the pier, and those are designed to accommodate the movement between the two structures. And over the last few years, as folks know, we've invested in repairs to the seawall itself while ensuring public safety through regular monitoring and maintenance of that structure. Over the last few years, we've continued to replace broken glass panels, secured guardrail cables near the miners' landing, and repaired numerous metal plates and anchors near the Seattle Aquarium and Fire Station 5. In addition to this ongoing work that we've done over the last few years, SDOT crews immediately responded to this new development and installed the fencing that you now see and warning signs around Pier 58 to make sure that we keep people safe. SDOT is also the lead on permitting for the replacement structure that we'll talk about a little bit more, and we're working as rapidly as we can to expedite that permitting process with our partners as we seek to ensure public safety for people on the waterfront and for the businesses on adjacent piers as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Superintendent Aguirre briefly, and then I think on to Marshall.
Thank you, Director Zimbabwe. And yeah, I mean, we can turn it over to Marshall. I think as Sam stated, we've done some work. Parks and Recreation has replaced and repaired some of those transition plates along the pier near the aquarium as recently as 2017 and 2019. So this is an issue that we're aware of and have been working to mitigate and try to keep the public safe there. But I'll turn it over to Director Foster to talk about the overall future of Pier 58 within the waterfront project.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. This is Marshall Foster. I'm the director of the city's Office of Waterfront and Civic Projects. And our office is a sort of a focused, specialized office that is delivering the capital improvements on the waterfront, a mix both for the Parks and Recreation as well as SDOT, different infrastructure, including the heavy construction you see along Alaskan Way, and the replacement of Pier 62, which is the pier just north of the aquarium, which is nearly complete. As Jesus alluded to, yeah, the replacement of Pier 58 has been in the waterfront program from very early on. The replacement of the pier, fortunately, is fully funded, and the design of the replacement pier is just approaching 60% design, which basically means we're getting close to a final design for its replacement. And obviously, given the news from last week, we're working closely with both the Parks Department and SDOT to make sure that we're keeping the waterfront safe, and we're very appreciative of the fast work that took place to get fencing up and ensure that the public stayed off of the pier. What you can expect to see from the waterfront program is we will complete that design over the next 6 months, and we expect to complete the permitting process and to actually start the replacement construction of the new pier in 2022. It will take about 2 years to complete the replacement pier. So you'll see completion of it in early to mid 2024. So I think, from our perspective, the design is close to resolution. It's been through many years of public review and discussion, both in the community as well as at the Seattle Design Commission and elsewhere. And we're just feeling fortunate that we do have a full plan in place with funding to be able to replace Pier 58. In terms of the specifics, our budget for the replacement is $65 million, and it has a mix of funding sources attached to it. Once the new pier is completed, it'll actually be operated through a partnership The Seattle Parks Department will continue to maintain and operate the pier as it has historically. We'll also have the participation of the Friends of Waterfront Seattle, which is a nonprofit organization that was committed specifically to help program and activate our waterfront to keep it safe and inviting. They will be a partner to the Seattle Parks Department to help make that pier successful and inviting in the future. So that's a little bit about where we are in terms of the replacement plan. And I think I'll turn it back over to you, Jesus, for some next steps.
Thank you, Marshall. And I think so. As a result of some additional information we got from the engineers yesterday, they confirmed our concerns in terms of the deterioration of the facility, and the pier has experienced some significant shifting and is no longer safe for public access. And of course, they've confirmed what we already knew, but the idea that we have to remove this pier, and they confirmed that we need to accelerate the removal. So the pier is shifting in multiple places, and our removal plan is going to have to take into account the fact that there are adjoining properties, the aquarium to the north, and the Miners Landing and the Great Wheel piers to the south. So whatever plan we put in place with the engineers and the contractors will make sure that preserves the integrity of the neighboring properties, and also as in many cases some of the utilities are shared or run across some of the parks and recreation properties, so we'll have to work through that. So I think the conclusion here is that the pier is not going to reopen to the public, and again we're going to have to remove it sooner than we anticipated. We've already begun working with our partners at the Office of Waterfront and Transportation, and we'll begin a plan to accelerate that removal, including the permitting process, which Sam mentioned is under the auspices of the Department of Transportation. So the timing really is going to depend on sort of the contracting, but dictated by the engineering reports and making sure that we can remove the pier safely. And then it doesn't create any challenges to the adjoining properties. We will be enhancing the project page that exists for Pier 58, and we're committed to continuing to provide updates as this work progresses, both on that website and as we get a tighter plan for the removal and replacement, we'll push that out publicly as part of a press release as well. So. On that note, I'll stop and see if there are any questions that either Marshall or Sam or I could try to answer.
Thank you so much. So again, just a reminder, people can utilize the chat function if that's easier than taking yourself off mute, or technical challenges are preventing you from doing so. But we would ask that people please use the hand raising function. It's a tiny little hand icon that we will use to note that you have a question. And then we will call on you, and then please bring yourself off mute, or we will work to do so on the back end and work through your question. So first question, Graham Johnson noted that you have a question, and then Kevin Schofield, we will go to you next. Go ahead, Graham.
Hey, thank you so much. Just wondering if you might be able to just give in a little more detail, kind of exactly the failure that we're seeing. As I was down there a little while ago, it looked like it was kind of slumping sort of maybe to the southwest, but you mentioned that there's failure in multiple places. I don't know, do we have any pilings that have broken that that aren't visible, that kind of thing? Can you just describe what's happened here in the last week or so, a little more detail?
Yeah, and we'll be able to, I'll take that. We'll be able to give you more specifics once we get a written report by the engineers who were out there yesterday. But you're right, it is shifting in several places. Once we get that specific information from the engineers, we'll post that along with the other two reports that are up.
Great, thank you. Kevin, you are next on the list.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yeah. Okay,
great. So just a couple follow-up questions on the funding. You mentioned that the funding is secured for this. What are the exact sources of the funding for this? And in particular, is LID funding implicated in this at all? And since it looks like you have to accelerate the demolition of the existing pier, is the funding available now to go ahead and do that, or are you going to have to draw from other sources for that?
Sure, I can take that one. So the short answer, Kevin, on the LID is yes, there are LID funds included in the Pier 58 budget. I'll just break it down for you real quick. Of the 65 million, 27 million is from the LID, 27 million is from our philanthropic partners, and 11 million is from city funds, including the Metropolitan Park District. If demo is needed in the short term, whether it's partial, complete, we are confident we'll be able to find funding to do that because of the public safety need for it. And we'll be looking at, sources within the Waterfront program to help make that happen.
Thank you, Marshall. Kevin, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that did.
Great, thank you. Rich Smith, you are next on the list.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Great. Could you describe the potential danger to the nearby piers? Do you know how, what could happen to the Seattle Great Wheel, or what could happen to the aquarium?
I'll start a little bit, but I think fundamentally the answer to those questions is really going to come from the engineering report. But I will say that we are concerned about the shifting, and it's shifting in several different places. The piers are separate from each other, so it's this pier is not attached to the aquarium. Pier is not attached to the pier to the south. But obviously, if it's moving and shifting, there could be some impact there if we don't move quickly. So the engineering report will sort of tell us that. I don't know specifically, depending on how it's shifting and which way it's moving would determine sort of what, if any, specific potential impact it will have on the neighboring properties. But again, we'll have more information once we get the written report from the engineers. And then, of course, that will be incorporated into our plan as we remove it, and certainly will impact the timing of this, because if there is any risk to any of the properties, obviously that's going to be part of our calculus here to try to move it as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Christine, I see a question written out by you. Would you like to ask it directly? And if not, I can read it out for you.
Could you read it out? I'm new to web conferencing.
We can hear you. It's a little garbly, but let's try, and then I can always do my best interpretation.
It just sounds. I'm Christine Claridge, Seattle Times. It sounds like you're not really going to hurry up at all. You're just going to be like, yeah, okay, we're going to close this off, remove it, and we're pretty much sticking to the same plan because this is not that much of an emergency.
I mean, we are going to remove it at an accelerated rate. So it is enough of an emergency where we felt compelled to fence it off and secure it and not allow public on it any longer. We put that temporary fencing up pending further analysis and evaluation from the engineers. And now that we've had that, now that that's happened, then that will inform how quickly we do this. But it's clear to us that this will need to be accelerated, and it will need to be removed sooner than we expect. And we will move forward with doing that.
And I can also add that, SDOT is the lead on the permitting aspect of that, and we will do everything we can to expedite and accelerate that. But we'll need to go through the permitting process for demolition, and also for the reconstruction.
And I want to clarify a little bit. I misspoke earlier when I talked about the fact that these piers were not connected. It turns out, I'm told, the Pier 57 and Pier 58 are actually interconnected. So that will obviously be part of our evaluation as we determine a plan for the removal. In addition, there are some utilities that are tied together on our pier that are going to need to be disconnected or moved to make sure that there's no risk of those being sheared off or pulled off.
Thank you. And Graham, I see that you have another question. You're welcome to come off of mute and ask your question directly.
Thanks so much. And just following up on that, if you do have to relocate utilities, could that impact, the neighboring piers? I mean, the aquarium. These are places that have taken a big hit with COVID, and I can only imagine if they would somehow have a problem where they have to have utilities disconnected. Do we have a sense of that yet? And also, can you just clarify, and I may have missed this, when that newest engineering report is expected to be available, the one that will, give us more information about the problem? I may have missed that. I apologize.
Yeah, in terms of the report, so the engineers were out there yesterday, and so we're waiting to get an official report from them in writing. And as soon as we get it, we'll make it available. Obviously, they've shared verbally some of their findings, which again confirms that what we already knew, which was that this pier is failing and we need to remove it. We just need to remove it a little faster than we anticipated. In terms of the utilities, we can follow up and give you a specific answer to that question. But there, obviously, if I know, for example, on the aquarium side, there's a new substation there, a new access for electrical stuff that is on their pier that it wouldn't be impacted by the removal of the pier, except potentially for a little bit of access. But so their operations wouldn't be impacted in terms of the utilities. But we'll confirm in terms of the other utilities. And again, obviously, we want to make sure that the impact to other businesses is mitigated. So we'll incorporate that into our planning and make sure that we don't impact folks unnecessarily.
I'll just add to that as well. We're in the middle of rebuilding Alaskan Way right now. There are hundreds of utility connections which are being replaced. So we have a whole process with the support of City Light and SPU that we go through to provide temporary connections when they're needed, and to time any types of outages for times when businesses are closed, off hours. So if that were needed here, we would have the same approach and protocol for how we help to make sure businesses like Miners Landing or the aquarium, if they had to be impacted, which we don't know, but if they were, that they were able to keep operating.
Thank you, Marshall. I'm looking through and I'm not seeing additional hands or questions in the chat box. If folks have a question, here's one more chance to ask it, while acknowledging that this is early days and opportunities for sharing additional, more detailed information are just over the horizon, but we wanted to make sure that there was press availability first thing this morning. And not seeing any additional hands, I'd like to just turn it over. Kevin, I see your hand going up. Kevin.
So who issues the permit? Is that the state? And are you anticipating any issues around sort of shoreline restrictions, anything, or is that all taken care of in the waterfront master plan already?
So I can speak a little bit to this. So Kevin, we have actually there's already been some communication since the event with our primary permitters, which is the Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Natural Resources. So they're already aware that we have a situation and we may be pursuing some short-term permits for partial or complete demolition. That's a discussion that needs to take place. That's all couched in the larger permitting discussion that's already underway for the replacement of Pier 58 as a whole. So there's a really good ongoing staff dialogue already about the new pier. And so we're able to take advantage of that conversation and those relationships to deal with this immediate permitting need potentially around the pier today.
Thank you, Marshall. So I'd now like to turn it over to Superintendent Aguirre for closing remarks, and then Sam and Marshall. And just noting a little housekeeping bit, we will continue to share the reports and materials as they come out through press releases, blogs, but we will also start hosting them on the Pier 58 project site, and look forward to sharing more of those details with everybody later this week. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And not much to add here to wrap up, but just again, we look forward to, as you said, Michael, to continue to share information with the public, the documents that we get. Also look forward to working closely with the Waterfront and SDOT as we move forward. Of course, unfortunately, we're this is happening a little faster than we expected, but the good news is this is a project that was already planned, is funded, and we've got two great partner agencies that will help us make this happen very, very quickly. So thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for the great questions. I'll turn it over to my colleagues here, and if they want to add anything in closing.
Sure, I'll just reiterate our efforts focused on the safety and the infrastructure of the seawall, which is in good shape and has not shifted, and then our work, I think, across all city government to make sure we're holding the safety of the public and the businesses and the surrounding structures first and foremost in our actions, and the urgency with which we're all acting to bring this forward.
Yeah, nothing more to add. I'll just reiterate that the public safety has come first in this. We're fortunate to have funding in place to be able to advance replacement, and our office really looks forward to working with the public and our partner agencies to get this done.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the time, the opportunity to share an update. And as I mentioned, we'll continue to share information with regard to the situation that's happening in real time, through links, and also posting for general public access in the Pier 58 project page. Thank you all so much. Cheers.